We all have good days and bad days. And sometimes you cannot wait for that terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day to just go away. But for millions of people, every day is a bad day. It doesn't just go away if they're dealing with trauma or another difficult situation. Consider Charlie. Charlie is super excited because she just got this new dream job and it meets all of the criteria and it's remote, so bonus. But she's already butting heads with her boss. She just doesn't trust him. And you are Charlie's coworker, and you know that she just left a toxic work environment. And you know when people have dealt with trauma, it's hard for them to trust people. I've gotten the pleasure of working with people like Charlie for over a decade, and as a psychiatrist, I've also gotten the privilege of being able to work with offenders. And guess what? They all want the same things when they've dealt with the trauma. They want to feel safe and trust people. They want to love and just enjoy their lives. But trauma can make it difficult for them. Therapy and medications can definitely help. But for some of them, they need additional tools, like restorative justice. Restorative justice is a conduit for healing. It's when a survivor, someone who's been harmed, is brought in connection with an offender, someone who's done the harm. And together, they can work towards healing and restoration. Now, it's not for everyone, but in this case, survivors get to tell an offender exactly how they've been injured. And the offender gets to make an apology, and in some cases, make an amends. Now, there are restorative justice programs all over the world. I mean, in Australia, New Zealand, in the UK, Canada, here in the United States. And we know that restorative justice, it works, but it's not easy. And when we hear offender, we all think about a hardened criminal, right? But we use restorative justice in our schools and disputes. We use them for traffic incidents. We use them in our neighborhoods when there's conflict, and in most workplaces, there is a form of restorative justice. The people who have dealt with some of these issues that I'm talking about, they sometimes specifically seek me out because they're familiar with my story. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and I can tell you that trauma and abuse, it steals your innocence and it paralyzes your voice. And I've seen power and control used as weapons. And I can tell you that I wanted to get control back. I wanted to get power. I wanted to see my abuser suffer physically. And when it happened, it was hollow and not what I expected it to be. I can tell you that the thing that I really wanted was to get my life back. I wanted all the different pieces of myself that were all over the place. I wanted my peace of mind. I wanted my identity. I wanted my body back. And again, restorative justice was something that I've used personally. But we know that there are 3 things that you need for a restorative justice effort. Number 1, you absolutely have to have an offender who accepts responsibility for what they've done. And they make an apology or an offer to amends. Now, Susan, for example, she's about to walk down that aisle and marry the man of her dreams. And she's going to pledge her life to him. But she decided to go hang out with some of her friends first from work, and the music was just flowing. It was an energizing atmosphere. I mean, the drinks are flowing, the food just tastes wonderful. And things just kind of got carried away. She made one bad decision. And the next morning when she was expecting to wake up next to her fiance, she woke up next to one of her coworkers, and not necessarily one that she particularly likes. And she felt nothing, no regret, no remorse. When I met with her for counseling, I recommended that she make an apology and asked for the way that she could make amends. And her fiance, when she told him, he was devastated. And when she saw the look on his face, that's when she got it. And she asked him sincerely to forgive her and asked what she could do to make amends. And for her, that meant leaving that particular department, going to a different location. It postponed that wedding for about a year. But after counseling, they were able to get married. Now, in contrast to Susan, not everybody makes a direct connection between the trauma and the injury. And in those cases, they sometimes need mediation or therapy. And if it's a civil suit or if they're incarcerated, they don't reach out to the survivor directly. There's a mediator, but they can start the process for getting their lives back. The second element that's necessary is a prepared survivor, and no one could have been more prepared than Malia. She endured horrific child abuse at the hands of multiple male members of her family. And she said, if I'm going to have to do this, and I don't want to do this, I'm going to get paid for it. So she became a call girl, and it was very lucrative, but it lacked the intimacy that she needed. So she joined one of our restorative trauma programs. And in it, I mean wall after wall of all of the barriers that she had created to protect herself. They just started crashing down until she got to that impenetrable wall in the area of forgiveness. That was something that she just could not do. But I explained to her that forgiveness can be transformative because it allows you to do things that you never would have been able to do. In a U.S. study in Pennsylvania, survivors who went through a restorative justice program noted that if they had an apology and they gave forgiveness, they were significantly more likely to have a reduction in trauma symptoms. In the UK and in Australia, a series of studies showed that for survivors who participated in programming, there was a reduced desire for revenge. And in the United States, it was a reduced desire to actually harm someone, which is a very good thing because we don't want to do that. But the wonderful thing in all of these studies is that people were able to start getting their lives back. And when I explained this to Malia, she was a little resistant, but it had to be her choice and her whole time. But I explained that she wasn't letting her relatives off the hook. She was letting go of the things that were holding her down. You see, unforgiveness is tantamount to pushing away happiness and then inviting depression and anxiety. Because for the reward centers of the brain, it actually activates pain. It decreases dopamine, which is one of our hormones that helps with happiness, and it increases the sense of depression and anxiety. But forgiveness actually decreases depression and anxiety, and it actually increases our sense of well-being. And it helps us have better interpersonal relationships. And that's exactly what it did for Malia. Again, her choice, her time. But when she chose to forgive, it opened up a whole new world for her, including being able to see for the first time a particular young man who was very interested in her. And by the end of the program, she was falling in love for the very first time. The third element to a successful program is you. It's the community. You are involved in face-to-face encounters with survivors and offenders every single day. You're also involved in the day-to-day functioning within your neighborhoods, within your communities. You might find yourself in Sean's position. Sean was a salesperson for a multinational corporation. And lo and behold, one day he looks in the news and realizes that his company is involved in a major waste management disaster. And he knew he wanted to do something about it, but wasn't quite sure where to start. And when he had to show up for a press conference, boom, the idea hit him about how he could work side by side with community members as consultants to make sure that there was healing across the whole community, both physically within the environment, but also in terms of that trust factor between the community and that company. Community, survivors, offenders. Sometimes they are not mutually exclusive. And if you're like in Sean's case, you might find yourself in all three. And the way that we heal also overlaps as well. Restorative justice was one of the tools that I used. I was in a therapeutic relationship. I had family members and support. And because of that, I was able to go through a healing process. The offender was incarcerated in my case, and he went through a comprehensive victims awareness program. An encounter was arranged. He asked for my forgiveness, and I gave it. But I also gave myself the different pieces of my life that were scattered. And that helped me get my life back. You might be wondering if this is a process that's right for you, and it does depend on where you see yourself. If you see yourself as a survivor like Malia, I encourage you to get in a comprehensive, evidence-based trauma program like cognitive processing therapy, and then with the help and support of a therapist or your community, work on reordering your steps, your sense of safety, trust, esteem, and intimacy, and power. You can be on the process to becoming empowered in your own life. If you see yourself as the offender, like Susan, make sure you get a better understanding of how your actions have impacted others. Then create an action plan that's going to help you do things that are going to make a difference in your life and in the lives of others. And if you are a community member, start working on how you can create circles of protection in your own neighborhood, starting with individuals and then branching out. Restorative justice, it works. And forgiveness is an integral process for successful programs. But you might want to start with little steps of forgiveness and build your way up. So like Charlie, giving her boss grace when she sees that he's kind of maybe saying something that's causing some anxiety within her. Those small steps help you with changing the reward centers of your brain. It helps you renew your mind, and ultimately, it can help you get your life back.